Hello everyone and welcome to SUGTalks. I'm Craig Dale, your host, and together with our special guest, we'll take a deep dive into the topics, challenges and opportunities facing SAP users today. Please make sure you do subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. I'm delighted today to be joined by our two Women in SAP community leads, Emma Chambers, Head of Apps and Platforms at Cala and also UKISUG Director, and Fiona Warburg, Solution Architecture Practice Manager at Cooperative Group. So welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
Today, we're going to focus on the Women in SAP community, exploring career progression, practical support, and challenges women continue to face across the SAP ecosystem. And just before we get into that, I'd just like to ask you, what's an activity you thought would be hard that turned out to be easier than expected? Now, while you ponder that, when I got this, I thought, oh, Lord. And you know what it is? Hosting podcasts for me. I was, and am still, I suppose, so nervous at these things, and especially that first time having to listen back to my own voice. Very nervous. But I do find that it's the lovely guests that make it easier for me, so no pressure on either of you there. So, Fiona, may we start with you?
No, this is actually quite a hard one, because most of the things I've ended up trying to do in the last year or two have ended up being challenging. And I'll be honest, it's not a proper answer, so I'm going to be a politician here and answer it how I want to answer it, and go for it's about 2 years ago I learnt to ride a motorbike. So
wow.
So I am a fully qualified, got my direct access, and own a motorbike now. So it was one of those, it wasn't as easy as I expected, although I don't know what quite I expected to do. But now that I'm on it and I'm doing it, I'm very much enjoying it. I don't think my mum and dad appreciate me doing it, particularly my mum.
I can imagine.
And it has got easier. So I think it started off very hard and has got easier, and I've started to enjoy it more. So it's
fantastic.
It's a different way of answering it, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. Emma?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked Fiona first. Because all I can think of is what you think might be easy and ends up being hard, like answering these questions on the spot. I think, though, there is something I thought I would never master, which actually ended up being, I don't know if easy is the right word. When I started doing yoga, I thought I'm never, ever going to do a handstand. Look at these people doing handstands. How are they going to do that? Not handstand, headstand, because I still haven't mastered handstand. Headstands. And actually, I was surprised when I could do it quite quickly. I don't know if I'd necessarily say it's easy, but a bit like Fiona says, practice makes perfect. And if you practice and stick at something, and I was surprised that it was something that I could do in a short space of time, let's say that, if you apply yourself and practice it.
Wow, fantastic. With or without hands?
Well, headstand is on your head. I'm doing, for the purpose of the podcast, I'm doing the actions for Craig now, but nobody else can see it. rather than just on your hands. So you have to use your hands, but they're on the floor.
Okay, so not quite balancing, just on your head, and you can let your arms out yet.
I haven't tried it.
Please don't. Not on the back of this. I really don't want any solicitors' letters coming through. Let's move on to safer topics now, if we can. So we spoke together around about this time last year, really, and looking back, what feels like the most meaningful progress the Women in SAP community has made since then?
Well, I'll jump in if that's okay to start talking about my experience sitting on the board. And yes, it was this time last year when we were discussing, what we felt was the progress in the previous year, because we always time this kind of check-in with you, Craig, around March, because it's International Women's Day. It's also Women's History Month, so it's a good point to look at what the community's been up to. And certainly with the women in SAP community, as a UKISUG community, one of the main things that's happened in the last year is that we have increased our representation significantly on the board that represents all of our members, that works with the UKISUG, obviously, and the partners. And so I think we've gone from, I was the only female on the board, to now we have 3 and 5. Is that right?
Correct.
I'm doing the numbers in my head, which is a significant shift, and I think is testament to the fact that the member base as well, want to see diversity. They want to see that representation at the board level. I think it brings different perspectives. It brings different approaches, and for me, it's a very visible representation as well of how we are driving diversity and driving women's voices and representation as well in the community.
Oh, thank you. Anything stand out for you, Fiona?
Yeah, I think that 2 things. One is, we're seeing sort of more women come and speaking at events. I think at the conference this year, I can't remember the exact numbers, but we've increased the number of women speakers. And I think at our events during the year, we're starting to see more women get up and speak. And the other thing is actually we're seeing more engagement from other organisations. So starting to run, we'll probably talk about more later, but some co-run events. Mm-hmm. So people, rather than just attending, they're wanting to participate. They want to actually do things with us, which is great.
Yeah, as Fiona mentioned at Connect this year, it was really good to see that although numbers of female speakers individually are still quite low, and we're always pushing to see more women up on stage, over 40% of our panels now contained a woman, which is a significant move forward, I think. So hopefully that trend will continue. And also we'll see more delegates as well coming to our events.
Oh, fantastic. And as we look ahead, taking some of those points on board, what are the key priorities and plans for the women in SAP community in 2026? And where are you looking to focus your time and energy?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it's into our events. Emma and I have already met a number of times. So some of the team from the UKISUG to make sure we're running the right events, the right content, and we want to draw in more participation, not just attendance, and looking to making sure it's tangible impact. And it's us getting those events right, the people who are presenting at those events and the topics right.
Yeah,
That's where I think a lot of our effort will be.
I think to pick up on what Fiona said, tangible and actionable outcomes from our events are really important. So, there's a long list of topics that we can talk about where the challenges exist and persist, quite, entrenched barriers and things for women. So it's quite good to have. We really want to focus on having sessions where people can come away with actual action. So it's not just talking about the challenges, but actually there are things that they can do to address them. And so we are putting a focus on some more practical events as well. We're having one in March to coincide with International Women's Day, which is going to be supporting women in how to actually take practical tips around their development, around their profile. We did this last year. It was very successful, and we're doing it again, supported by Precisely. So that's an event to look out for. We're also making sure that we continue those events where women can grow their network, because there is a great strength in being able to be part of the community and just have other allies and other members of the network that you can reach out to. So we're also hosting some women's afternoon teas again in March. And we've got our 2 big flagship events now. So we've traditionally held our all-day event in London, which has always been incredibly popular. Really, it gives us an opportunity to get lots of women and allies together, usually over 100 people, and have a whole day focused on these kind of topics and networking. And last year we did a half-day event in Dublin as well, which you attended with us as well, Craig.
Yes, indeed.
And that was, I think you'll agree, very successful, very well received. And so we're looking to do another one in Dublin as well in October. So we're kind of expanding our range of events and also our reach, where we're holding these events. We're looking to do one in Manchester as well, which is, again, supported by a partner that will open up opportunities for those who can't necessarily get to London, so we can have an event in the Northwest. And we're going to continue our very, very popular mentoring sessions, which we hold every month, and again, which people find are very constructive for taking away practical strategies and learning that we can take into their everyday jobs as well.
Oh wow! So there's lots to come, which
There's
I
loads.
think,
Yes.
Keeps
us busy.
maybe we talked about speaking there. We talked about lots of different events coming up, getting more women involved in everything within the community, and I think that leads us nicely onto the International Women's Day theme this year, which is Give to Gain. So, what's behind that theme, and do you think it resonates with the women in SAP community?
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
Totally.
The sentiment behind the theme is that by giving, you get back, obviously, and it's not just aimed at women and women in the community. And there's some obvious really clear examples, and Fiona and I are volunteers in this. We are giving our time, we're giving our efforts into the community, and it's what you can get back for yourself and for the community. But it's also meant to remind people that increasing diversity, supporting women and other underrepresented groups isn't just good for those individuals, and it isn't just good for the person that's doing the giving, although it does give you a really good sense of achievement, satisfaction, community, etc. But it's also really good on a wider scale. Organisations only really thrive when they have diverse teams and diverse leadership, and they have wide representation. They perform better financially, they have better ESG policies, they score better on all the indices across productivity to well-being to staff happiness, etc. So it's good for organisations, it's imperative for organisations really, and it's good for society as a whole. So it serves everybody to give of your time, give of your experience, give your energy to this effort, and it pays back in so many multiple ways.
Yeah. And I think it 100% aligns with the women in SAP community. It's what like Emma said, we are giving our time to one for the broader community, but like you say, we do both get something from it as well. So, things like when we get, contribute a story, if somebody's up there talking, they gain confidence, they gain visibility, but the community as a whole is gaining from what they're given with regards to advice. So I think it's 100% aligns to what we're doing.
And it's very fulfilling, isn't it, Fiona?
Oh, very much so.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see when you make a difference. We do have women come up to us at the end of events, and they will talk to us about, something they learned at a previous event, how it made them look at their career differently, some proactive step that they've taken, and it has actually meant, a promotion or a change in role. It can be, literally life-changing for them. So it is a very, very satisfying, fulfilling thing to do. And it will have wide ramifications across all of society. We know that so many of the important things in society run off the goodwill of volunteers, don't they? And from people giving of their time. We're not all doing it just because we're paid to do it. So it's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! That's great to hear. And I suppose that putting in, and we always say when we run workshops and things, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. I suppose it's like doing headstands, learning to ride a motorbike. The more effort and the time you give to it, the better you're going to be at it, and you'll get more fulfillment back
100%.
from it.
Good analogy, Craig.
Yes.
That's it. And podcasts. It's a really good analogy for our volunteers as well, isn't it? That community, the wider UKISUG community, and the more events that we get, the more value that we provide to our members. It's so it's not just enhanced, but it's so dependent upon the engagement of our volunteers and the contributions of people who come to the events, who sign up for the conference. The more that they engage, the more they give in, the more everybody gets back. And that's the theme of Give to Gain for International Women's Day. The more you all individually give, everybody collectively gets that paid back multiple times over.
Thank you. You both touched on allies as well. And so how does the Women in SAP community help women and allies to give support, experience or time, while also gaining confidence, opportunity and visibility in return?
Well, I think for me, particularly for allies, and I think that's one area that I'd like to focus on more. Well, I think Emma and I always try to get more allies along to our events, but if they come along and listen with regards to they get a better understanding of different perspectives, and that ultimately makes them stronger leaders and collaborators. So, being able to understand other people's points of view and where they're coming from and lived experiences, because I think there are some things that potentially our allies are not living through. They can learn about that at our events, listen in.
It's true. We get a lot of support from some very strong male allies who really want to, they understand, as we know, that women can't solve this issue on their own, and neither should they. This is for everyone, society to address. But they genuinely come along and hear stories and say, I didn't know that was still happening, or I didn't know this was a thing. So, it is really about education and awareness, about everybody being open and sharing, what's happening, what women are experiencing. And as Fiona said, this helps our, all allies, including the male allies, to be more inclusive in their own leadership, really more understanding of the pressures that everybody may be under. And the different things that we can do to support people. But it also helps them when we can have an honest conversation about what helps to support, what kind of practical measures would help to support us as well, because some male allies in particular say, well, I don't want to steamroller in and look like I'm speaking up for somebody, because is that then taking over in a different way? So a lot of men particularly have concern about, how do I do allyship in the right way? How do I look like I'm just trying to save the day or speak over somebody? And it's about how to support, amplify somebody's voice rather than take their voice away. So we get that. That's quite a difficult challenge for all of us if we're trying to support somebody, and how do you do it without just taking over? So this year we're looking to run an allyship session, especially for men, because we also understand that while we want to see lots of men at our events, they may be holding back and saying, well, that's an event for women. If I take that spot, I'm taking a spot away from a woman. We would like to see, we don't want it to become a male-dominated space, obviously. We have that every day in the tech industry. So, we don't want to tip the balance, but we do want to get men into the room. So what we want to do is hold an allyship session where it is just only for men to come along and talk with their peers and talk with others about how can you do allyship in a constructive, positive way, and also take the message back to other men in the organisation. Because with the best will in the world, privilege is still invisible to a lot of people who don't have it. Who have it. Privilege is invisible to those who have it, and they may not be aware there is an issue. So men have a pivotal role in taking that back as well to other male colleagues and spreading the message really about what they may not see as their direct experience.
Thank you.
We know our community, but we don't know yours yet. Why not share the benefits of your UKISUG membership with those who don't know about us? The UKISUG referral scheme rewards you for helping to grow and develop our community. You can check out the link in the description to find out more about how you can get involved. Terms and conditions apply. We hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast.
And so you've mentioned benefit to women, benefit to men as allies, and so we're moving a broader scope, if you like, for the women in SAP community. So how do communities like Women in SAP benefit everyone, across SAP teams and organisations?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things Emma's already brought up is around that high-performing teams are diverse. So, by actually encouraging organisations to be diverse through the Women in SAP community, that is already bringing benefit back to the organisation, just inherently. But things like when women feel supported, you've got retention improves. So, you're retaining all that knowledge within the organisations. And actually one of the things around discussions then hopefully become a little more normalised when they come back about inclusion. and equity, which then hopefully leads to stronger leadership and generally just better organisational outcomes.
Your talent pool widens as well. If you have strong female representation in the organisation and women can see that there is a pathway for them, then it just widens the available talent that you can bring into the organisation. Encouraging girls to do STEM subjects as well, so that we can get more people into tech. And we are, a couple of years ago, we invited an organisation to come and talk at one of our events, Innovate Her, who Fiona has a strong link with through the co-op, to talk about how female senior leaders can actually get into schools as well through this organisation, to be advocates for girls looking at careers in STEM, because it's still a very under-resourced, untapped resource level. And it can be difficult. Though we're always saying that, you don't have to be technically minded to have a career in tech, and increasingly less so now as, the democratization of technology. But we still need coders, we need developers, we need people who have done technical subjects. And even when girls, academically outperform at those subjects, they don't tend to pick careers in those subjects, or they don't perhaps pick it for further study. So, there's still a lot of work to do to provide representation, provide role modelling and connections back into education to encourage girls to take those routes and not drop off along the wayside, really. So that's a real benefit that a community like ours can provide, just in providing access to a pool of those women, a network of those women as well, that these kind of charities can work with. I think also Fiona talked about the necessity for diverse teams. If you're developing products, you're developing products for a very wide user base and a diverse user base. And if you don't have those perspectives within your development teams, within your testing teams, then you're not developing something that's going to work for everybody. There's a lot of, we remember like the initial facial recognition software that didn't work for black people. Possibly still they have challenges around that. So that, there's a lot of things that are developed for a certain persona, which doesn't necessarily include women, doesn't necessarily include people with different abilities, body differences. So it's all of these different areas of intersectional diversity that have to be considered in teams. So, gender balance is just one of them.
Staying on that diversity theme and talent pool, and you were talking there about girls moving into STEM, etc. So as we're bringing in the next generation, if you like, into the workplace, and as Gen Z and the next generation enter the workforce, I feel they have probably very clear expectations around inclusion and culture. So how important is it that organisations get this right now rather than later?
Here's a fact to make you feel old, Craig.
Oh,
the oldest
thanks.
Gen Z are 29 this year.
Oh no.
So, you've been in the workforce for a while. Yeah,
Butterburn, still Butterburn.
Yeah, you're right. I think, this Gen Z, the next generation after, these are born digital people, and they just expect this kind of, digital channel, digital experience. It can have pros and cons, I think, because they also, we also see in a workforce now that perhaps hasn't had the same kind of natural connections that we've had to create in a pre-digital world. So I think there's a balance that we definitely need to work on to make sure that while they come in with their, digital expectations and digital skills, that they don't lose the art of communication, connection, and AI. Generative AI, obviously, we all know is a bit of a double-edged sword. So there is a risk of how will they, develop critical thought and research skills and all the things that you could just lean on AI to do now. But you're right. If you don't have that kind of approach, if you don't have an inclusive approach and a supportive workforce, then certainly in terms of young women, because there is a divergence between young women and young men, you're not going to appeal to that workforce, which means you're missing out on a huge amount of talent. There is a bit of, evidence that the young men are perhaps going a little bit more to the right, as they say, the political spectrum, and some areas of like tradition. But generally, I think you're right that across the board, young people now will just expect a different experience and a different culture to perhaps, we old schoolers did when we first
started. But I agree,
work.
Emma, that we've had stories from mostly mothers with young sons, and the stories are actually quite disturbing with regards to some of the views, which are, I would say, particularly a little antiquated. But it's like they're coming back round, and I'm not sure where that's coming from. So I agree, workplaces do need to cater for, particularly, I would say, views of some of their Gen Z coming through, but there's definitely still work to be done because of some of the stories we're hearing at our events.
Yeah, we all see the rise of toxic masculinity in some corners of the internet, for example, and so communication is key, really. I think exposure and education is really key to that, because there is a potential for some women's rights, let's say, and equity to slide backwards, as we've seen in certain parts of the world, and it's not a picture of just total linear progression without sliding back. Sometimes, we are sliding back in some areas.
I think so. While we're on challenges, what challenges do you feel are still persisting for women working in SAP and the wider tech sector too, particularly around progression, visibility, and leadership?
I think some of the there's definitely progression in some of the conversations that people are having now in the workplace that just wouldn't be commonplace before. So now, people are very open to talk about what are the challenges around childcare, benefiting all parents, not just women, but we know that women often take a lion's share of the workload there, and menopause, for example, menstruation, menopause, all these things that just weren't really discussed in the workplace. It is now much more commonplace to have policies around them. I think also, there's a rise in understanding of human-centered tech, and this is something also that Gen Z, I think, are bringing in with them. I don't want to say Gen Z, Gen Z. Apologies, everybody. Gen Z is bringing in with them. And I think an understanding of the importance of empathetic leadership, which is something that, women particularly can bring. Not to say there aren't male empathetic leaders, but it tends to be a trait that women, sort of amplify and increase in the workplace. But the things that really, I think, resolutely we seem to be stuck on and really not making much progress is the gender pay gap is very, very slow to change. 2025 figures for the UK, I think the pay gap was 12.8%, and that was only a movement from 13.1 to 12.8% in a year. It's very, very slow. The Trade Unions Congress did the analysis on what this means in effect in how much you work for free. So the average woman worked for free for the first 48 days of 2025 by those figures. So what they call Women's Pay Day falls on the 16th of Feb. So still quite a long way to go. And that gap widens for employees over 40, because that's when the more senior, higher paid roles disparity kicks in, with fewer women in senior leadership roles. So it actually gets wider beyond 40. And I think that representation is still a massive, massive challenge for us, because that's actually falling. That's where not only is it stuck, it's going backwards. So for 2025 data for the FTSE 100 companies, there are 10 female CEOs, and this is a slide back in previous years. And what's marked about it is that we've actually seen an increase in diversity at board levels. So 45% of people on boards now are women, which you think that's great. That's really good progress in the right direction. But then you see that at the top level CEO, it's only 9 to 10% and falling backwards. So not only does it highlight a persistent gap in those sort of top executive roles, despite progress in the board diversity, but that disparity itself suggests that it's systemic problem, systemic bias that's stopping women getting to those roles, because clearly it's not a pipeline issue. It's not that there aren't sufficient qualified women in the pipeline if we've got 45% of them reaching board levels. So it highlights a really intransigent blockage that is proving very, very difficult to get past.
And I think there's definitely in other roles as well. I work in architecture. My team of, I think about 17 now, I have one female. And that is the marketplace. I've gone out a number of times to recruit, and we just don't get women applying because they aren't in the marketplace.
It is. It's very difficult. I know organisations that really want to improve their representation women at senior leadership level, and they are, they say they struggle to find the candidates. But I think a lot of things also happen when you are at the sort of the taking that last step, and we talked a lot about this in our event last year, which was centered around the broken rung, and broken rung was sort of related to last year's International Women's Day theme, about how you sort of take that last step, because one thing that happens to women when they are at that stage in their career is they tend to be older. They may just be facing perimenopause or menopause. If there's not a lot of support for them at that point, they may say, well, do you know what? I might as well retire. Perhaps I've done enough. Perhaps I've got, I'm secure enough, and I can leave. So a lot of women don't take that last step. And so that means that the representation and the shift in numbers at the top levels just never happen. So there's still a lot of work that we have to do around how women are supported to the top table. I mean, as we've talked about, we know that's good for organisations, that's good for society, that's, it's good for everybody. Thanks
for that. And so if we can just flip that a little, if we may, where are you genuinely seeing progress? Are there areas that you are genuinely seeing progress, whether it's behaviours, leadership attitudes or organisational approaches?
I think for me, although we talked about it earlier and that we want to do more, is actually allyship. I think there are a lot more discussions ongoing within organisations around allyship, and building those as almost not quite formal networks, but actually promoting them, and getting more allies into women networks that exist within organisations. I don't think those conversations were happening even 2-3 years ago. So there's definitely progress in that space. I think, yes, there's a recognition now that these policies are necessary, that the kind of employee resource groups as well, not everybody would have had these groups before. And I think now they're a given in most workplaces, that people understand the need to support different types of employees. And again, it's not just about women. So these kind of conversations just weren't universal before, and I think they pretty much are now. So that's got to be a step in the right direction and genuine progress.
Okay, excellent. And so when we look at the women in SAP community, how does the community support women to navigate the corporate world and help their development? One of the things we've talked about in the past, and for Fiona, you'll remember in the very early days of the Women SAP, how are we lifting up at the women in our community and helping them?
I think it's just, even running our events, giving them spaces to come and talk about the challenges, but also, like Emma alluded to earlier, we're running events with practical advice. We're trying to give people actually tangible things they can take away and apply in their own roles. And hopefully, inspiring confidence to be able to say, and we know we've had this more than once, people that have come to our events who've actually taken away the confidence to apply for roles that they never thought they would have gone for in the past. So some of it is just building that. Actually, you can do it. One of the things that's, I suppose, well documented is that women, I think we've talked about this at previous podcasts, women won't apply for roles unless they think they tick 100% of the boxes. Actually, one of the things we do in our events is say, well, actually, you don't have to, just go out there and do that. And that's built through networks and people just taking that confidence back with them.
One of the things that we tap into through the organisation is by having that wealth of different members and partners that are all at different levels of maturity and size around their DE&I practices. We have access to a lot of very mature organisations that can give you practical tips on how do you make women's business networks meaningful. For example, how do you get executive sponsorship for an employee resource group and make sure that their voice is actually heard in decision making. So it's not just about when you're developing the products and services that you're pushing out the door, but in your internal policies, are they actually structured to make sure that they can support different people, different needs? And if they don't have a voice at the table when you're developing your policy, then that would never change. So we kind of talk a lot about these practical things that you can do, so you're not just a talking shop, you're not just talking about the challenges without addressing them. And I think the other thing it does is it gives people a space to challenge in as well. So the example that Fiona just talked about is a great one, where we talk about how do we help women to build confidence, and in a way say, be more like the men who apply for the job, even though they know they can't really do all of it. But it gave us a space, and we had this discussion in Dublin when you were there, Craig, and it was a really interesting one about what about challenging the narrative and saying, when are we going to actually teach humility and prize competence over that confidence, and actually say, perhaps we should be getting everybody to really assess their own competence, value that, and then apply for the jobs they know that they can do, for example. We don't want to say that anybody shouldn't be stretching themselves. We definitely want people to stretch themselves, step out of your comfort zone. And that's another topic we talk about a lot, around imposter syndrome, which was coined. We know everybody can have imposter syndrome, men and women alike, but it was coined specifically to describe women's experience, high-performing women's experience in the workplace. And it's a term that suggests that there's something wrong with you. It's a syndrome is something that's defective and faulty. So it gives you a space as well to try and change some of the narrative and say, actually, if you're outside of your comfort zone, you're doing something new and it's stretching you, why would you call yourself an imposter? So, I think that's something that really helps women to reshape the way they look at things as well, and the way that shapes their responses to, maybe they are outside their comfort zone, so they can see that as a positive. Maybe they are actually experiencing bias, so they can address it differently. They don't internalize it and say, this is actually me, I'm just not up to the job. So I think that's a really important thing that we offer, important space that we offer to people as well.
So for organisations listening, what are one or two practical actions leaders and managers can take to better support women to thrive in their organisation?
I would say support a women's network. Hopefully there'll be a day when we don't need these, but we do. Fund them, because it shouldn't be something that women have to do on their own and in their own time and alongside their day job. Make sure you have an executive sponsor. Make sure you have an allyship sponsor as well, and make sure you give them a voice at the table. I think there are some obvious things you can do as well to not just attract women to join your organisation, but to show that this is somewhere they can thrive. An obvious thing people can do with recruitment is take a look at your website. Even if you know that you're already a male-dominated area and you're trying to attract women, if your website is only showing all men, for example, if you haven't got photographs that show women in the workplace, then put some photographs up of women in the workplace. Don't make it look as if it's a place that's a male preserve. Look at the language that you're using in your job applications as well. And are you using open, inclusive language that will equally appeal to men and women, so that you're not narrowing down the amount of people that will apply for the roles? And when you have people in your organisation, look at your promotion policy. So it's not just about attracting people, but it's about how you retain them, how do you value them, and are your promotion practices equitable? Are your development processes equitable? So are they genuinely blind, as we say? So you're not considering gender, age, etc. when you're considering people for development opportunities. So those are the practical things I think that people can do to make sure that women and others feel supported once they are, in your organisation as well.
Yeah. And I think some really simple things, just actually nominate women for stretch roles. They're probably not going to be putting themselves forward, but I think you'll find, nominated and encouraged, they'll be taking you up on that. Even things like presentations, get their visibility up, pushing them forward for that. Potentially high profile programs, put them forward for those who are working on those. And particularly, advocate when opportunities arise. So rather than just mentoring, sort of just that extra push
Yeah, it's really,
but in a nice way, not in a pushy way.
It's a really good point, Fiona. And one thing that people also say don't assume that women don't want these opportunities, because quite often somebody will say afterwards, I would have liked to have done that, and they say, I assumed because you had kids, or I assumed that because that you wouldn't want this opportunity. So don't assume that women aren't ambitious, or that they don't want the challenge, or they don't want the opportunity. Is a really key practical thing to do. Have mentorship schemes as well, have sponsorship, and make them intentional. Don't just kind of, sometimes it happens naturally, and it's a really good thing when you've got an environment that fosters that natural selection of sponsorship and mentorship relationships. But I think having a scheme is really important, having a framework that people can fit into, and having proper coaching opportunity and making time for it. So it's not something that people are expected to do in their own time, but make time for it in their working day benefits everybody as well.
Thank you. Back to the women in SAP community now, specifically. If somebody wants to get involved, whether as a mentor, mentee, speaker or ally, what's the best way for them to engage?
Reach out. Contact me or Emma or one of the team, the user group team. Or even if you're not sure, come along to one of our events, see what we're about, listen in.
Yeah, certainly speak to any of the team. We're at a lot of events, even the non-women in SAP events. You'll see us at a lot of the other streams as well, and the UKISUG stand. Talk to any of the team and say you're interested. We're always looking for committee members to help us to formulate the kind of agenda for the year. There's a lot of events that we put on. There's a lot of logistics, finding speakers. So we'd love to hear from everybody who'd like to contribute in any way, from being a speaker to being a mentor to just finding out more about how do they come and attend an event for the first time. So yeah, it's a very open and inclusive community. We're very welcoming, so please do just reach out, and you can ping us on LinkedIn. You can there are lots of ways to approach us, and we'd be very, very glad to tell you how you can get involved.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So just as we come to a close, what's one message or piece of advice you'd like listeners to take away from our conversation?
I think for me, I really want to, we've talked about both the pros, the progress and the barriers. And I think, we really want to understand people that the job is not done. There is still quite a lot that we need to do. So we want to keep up this effort. But also don't be disheartened, because you're not alone. There are lots of people out there that are, have experiences to share. A lot of people you can learn from, a lot of people you can get support from, and that's men as well as women, not just through this community, but through other communities. But yeah, if it's something that resonates with you, we'd love to see you at our events and join our community. And for us, the more people that join, the better. The more people that understand and gain awareness and education and take away those practical tips, the better for everybody.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's around, it doesn't rely on grand gestures. We're not asking for people to give up, half their job to come and support this. It's lots of small intentional acts of inclusion. Don't think you have to go out and set up a women's network just to make it work. But there's lots of other things, as we've talked about in the podcast, that you can do. And I say, taking it back to the theme of International Women's Day. If each of us choose to give even a little bit, give that time, encouragement, or opportunity, then the collective gain is huge. So don't think it's all about the big grand gestures.
Emma, Fiona, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your insights, and for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
My pleasure. And thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it valuable. Please make sure you do subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. And until the next time, stay safe, stay well, and give to gain.